Do you have any tips for starting a cannabis business?
My first tip is probably don't start one. Yeah, I mean, I think people, initially the sort of understanding was I'm going to start, it's like striking gold. It's like the gold rush. And at least in California, the gold rush is pretty much done when it
Yeah.
comes, when it comes to cannabis. So people, who are looking to get into the business right now, I really just start with like, are you sure that this is what you want to do? Because it's really difficult.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people want to get into cannabis not realizing that the reason why it was so lucrative was because it was illegal.
I know.
You didn't have insurance, security, overhead, all the expenses that come with running a legal business. So now that you have to factor all of that in and you don't get those tax deductions that you would normally get because it's a Schedule 1 product, there's just not a lot of money in cannabis, unfortunately.
Yeah, the profit margins are real slim. The competition is real high. Right now in California, at least, we're dealing with a problem of oversupply. So maybe with federal legalization, that'll be let up a bit. But it's just really about branding and marketing and shelf space. And so if you don't have a retail, if you're a producer and you don't have a retail, it can be real tough. So I mean, it's real challenging. I mean, there are people that are succeeding in it, but I don't know how. It's very hard. It's very difficult. You have to pay lawyers, you have to pay taxes, regulatory concerns, compliance inspections. I mean, everything.
Yeah. So, fun fact, running a cannabis business is really expensive and you need millions of dollars in the California industry. Can you talk to us about Oklahoma's industry? Because I hear that's where the gold rush is, the green rush.
Yeah, and I think that window is closing too. But that it just because it was sort of like a free for all, no cap, no oversight, no regulation, no taxes. A lot of consumers were coming in from the surrounding states, so that was kind of like very lucrative. There might have been some folks who were crossing state lines,
Maybe.
maybe one or two. So yes, I don't know how much longer that's going to last. I think really where we're headed is unfortunately just kind of like conglomerate.
Yeah.
The True Leaf and the Cure Leaf and those companies are really really taking a stronghold. What's interesting though is that a lot of those companies are not in California yet.
Correct. Yeah. It's 2023. They're allowed to enter, correct?
Well, 2023 is the year that you can get a Type 5 license. So
Mhm.
that's just a big growing license.
Right.
But I think those big companies have stayed out of California just because it's too messy.
Yeah.
And they can go into a market like, that has 5, 10 licenses total for the whole state and use their influence to get a
Right.
large percentage of those. And so it's essentially a monopoly or at least large market share.
Yeah.
So that's why they're not coming into California where it's a vast state, right? It's like one of the biggest states.
Mhm.
They have to compete with all of these other operators that have been here for 20 years already in the
Yeah.
illicit market, or the unlicensed market. And so I think that's why they're staying out for
Yeah.
right now.
California is hard to compete in, and consumers don't really care about celebrity or big corporate names. They're more so concerned about quality. Californians love quality flower.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there's like it's totally different in California because we've had access to cannabis for so long and high quality cannabis. I remember I lived in Amsterdam. And the one coffee shop that we all went to was LA Confidential. And it was like exported from LA
How funny.
to Amsterdam. Yeah, I mean, it's the best cannabis in the world. So it's really hard to compete. And also I think like there's a craft appetite.
Yeah.
Like you want to try new things, you want a different vibe here and there. So
Yeah.
diverse SKUs or different brands is really important. But
Mhm.
I know that wasn't your original question. Your original question was, how do you start one? You want to be well capitalized. You want to know if you do make the decision, you want to do your research, do your homework. Location, and what kind of business do you want to be in? Like really spend time on that business model. Do you want to be in cultivation? Do you want to be in distribution? all of the above, vertically integrated. Some say that that's the best business model, others say it's not. So
Yeah.
really decide. And then obviously, like the regulations and getting licensed is super complicated. You have to get a local license first, then a state license. So the locals have a lot of control. So a lot of localities don't even license or allow it or
Yeah.
have capped out. So then you have to make the decision. Maybe you buy an existing business that's millions of dollars, minimum. So there's a lot of research. We have a great blog on our site. There's a lot of great content out there, to
Yeah.
digest and consume. Spend the time. Make sure you have the capital from the beginning, though, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Definitely capital.
Yeah.
All right. So, let me start that question over. What are your thoughts on federal legalization? Do you think it's going to happen? Is it a reality?
Yes, it will happen. I
Okay.
I don't know when. I think having seen California go through the legalization process was real eye-opening as to how complicated it is just in one state, a
Yeah.
large state, but in one state. So federally, it would be to come up with a regulatory scheme would be incredibly complicated unless they just sort of like punt it to
Yeah.
the locals, but they're going to want to have some oversight. Um, I think federal legalization would be the death of small businesses.
Yeah.
100%,
Yes.
because they're not going to be able to compete.
Yeah.
So everyone talks about federal legalization as if it's this great thing. And having been a part of the California legalization movement and being a proponent of it and seeing all the drawbacks and who's adversely impacted when we go federal, that's just going to be times 10. So for folks that are in the industry now, they're all just trying to basically set themselves up for an exit
Yes.
for federal legalization.
Yeah.
So I think it will happen. I don't know when. I don't know what will be like the catalyst. I think there has to be some sort of like, tipping point.
Yeah.
And what is that tipping point?
Yeah.
Is it the social justice and the criminal justice reform has been one big part of it, and
Hmm.
that's one of the most important parts of it.
Yeah.
But then the business side of it is really what's probably got the lobbying dollars to push it over. What we saw with CBD was when Big Pharma really had this product that they wanted to push, and that's when
Yeah.
it got descheduled, when hemp got descheduled. So there's going to have to be some really big interest. That's the tipping point there, I think.
Okay. So, what my thoughts on federal
Yeah.
okay. So, my thoughts on federal legalization is that I don't think it's happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
I look at the history, and if you're in cannabis, you should definitely read The New Jim Crow. But if you look at the history, we went from chattel slavery to convict leasing camps, which was worse because prior to that, you would want to keep your enslaved people alive because you needed them for free labor. In convict leasing camps, it's a lease, so you could work them to death.
Oh my God.
Then we moved to Jim Crow, which moved to mass incarceration. So this country, which was built on free labor, still to this day receives free labor through the 13th Amendment. And I don't think that they're going to be willing to legalize cannabis on a federal level because you're affecting, one, that free labor, two, all the people that are employed by prisons. The prison guard population is a really big lobbying group, almost 1 million people, plus the suppliers and manufacturers of all things in prisons, including the weapons that the guards carry, the uniforms. You also have to factor in that these prisons are in small towns, and those small towns receive these inmates, and these are population counts. And what does that affect? That affects the count for the census, which affects funding and seats in the House in Congress. So I think that there's no way, and heck, there are too many interests that need this to be illegal so that we can continue the for-profit private industry, which capitalizes on our mistakes and criminalizes us for non-crimes with no victims.
I
So,
think that you could even see a world where there is federal legalization and you still have criminalization, right?
yeah.
Where the big business interests are able to push their agenda and
Mhm.
make it profitable for themselves while still maintaining, those that are in the prisons. I think that that could happen, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, or at least those folks will be kept out of
Yeah.
the industry, like we're seeing, for example, in states where it's
Yeah.
legal. Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think we are pretty far away from it.
Yeah.
I think it's just not that. I think, like I said, I don't think there's like that one like catalyst, that
Yeah.
one thing that's going to push it over the edge to make it super important for
Yeah. Well,
I don't
my
know.
dream with legalization is before we get to legalization, we finally accept that this is a plant that grows like any other plants, and we treat it as such. Because I couldn't imagine my strawberries being taxed and treated a certain way based upon how much red the strawberry contains or how large it is. Could you imagine having to spend that much on any other produce? So I'm really hoping it's like the .com boom where it just kind of bust and we realize, oh, we can't really, do this. So I'm hoping we get to that point where it's like, oh, it's just like any other herb or vegetable. Let's calm down.
Well, if you look at the MORE Act and, some of the federal bills that are being proposed, there is like a potency tax, which is what you're
Correct.
talking about.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's a potency tax in New York.
There's one in Illinois for sure.
Yeah, there's one in New
Yeah.
York. And then even in California with CBD, the new bill for CBD, it's like, is it intoxicating? And if
Yeah.
it's intoxicating, then it has certain sort of
Yeah.
takes this regulatory path. And if it's not intoxicating, it's really not regulated. And it's really interesting, because all of these lawmakers just have no idea.
They don't know what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing.
At all.
And it's obviously a big sort of undertaking, and kudos, at least they're doing something, I guess.
Mhm.
But I don't know. It's a big mess, and it's going to stay a big mess for a
Yeah.
long time. It's just so interesting how cannabis encompasses across the board all of these like socioeconomic, political, racial, all of these different types of political ideas.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think what makes cannabis so expensive is the prohibition. You don't know how much is on the market. You don't know how much anything costs to produce it. So the control is pretty much the black market. So they set the prices. Now, with legality, your vegetables shouldn't be that expensive. I'm sorry. But hopefully these big companies, once they kind of eat everything away and it becomes kind of what happened with alcohol, hopefully we as a people realize we don't need them to grow our cannabis. And that's why we really have to protect homegrown cannabis so that we can source it for ourselves. But there's a lot of these big companies who are trying to eliminate homegrown so that they don't have their profit margins cut into, not for the love of the plant, but for the love of business. So,
Yeah, the one good thing I would say about like sort of big corporate coming into cannabis is that it will become just a commodity,
hmm
right? They will have the lobbying dollars and power to bring the
hmm
prices down, the taxes down,
yeah,
the large scale production. Yeah, I mean, I think like you think about cigarettes, for example, cigarettes have a really high tax,
yeah,
right? So, but cigarettes we know kill us
yeah,
and are highly addictive
yeah,
and all of these other things. None of that is true of cannabis,
correct.
but we're still treating it that way,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So like a pack of 15, 20, whatever's in a pack of cigarettes is, I don't know what it is in California now, like $10, which is way more than it was, 10 years ago. But
hmm
a pack of, I don't know, joints is $50.
Yeah. Plus tax.
plus lots of tax.
Yes.
Plus 27% here in Los Angeles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at it like side by side like that, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, very much so. One is helping your body, the other one is shortening your days.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and your
Insane.
quality of life. And yeah, I mean, it's just that is crazy. I never actually thought about that. Like you
Hmm.
compare side by side of a pack of cigarettes. Wow.
But yeah, I mean, when you think about it, to stay healthy in this country, to eat organically, to
Right.
eat fresh and clean, it's much more expensive.
True.
So yeah, your cannabis is going to be much more expensive because it's healing you. But the thing that will kill you, well, here's, 4x difference in the price. So it's unfair. Yeah.
Wow.
But that's grocery stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Let's leave.
Yeah.